Hello guys and welcome to my channel. I'm starting a new series and this is the first video, the introduction one about .NET Core from zero to hero. So if you are here, it's because you want to learn more about .NET Core. I want this to be a series so that you can feel confident enough to uh, start building your own applications, feel confident to apply to job positions about .NET Core, also for the interviews. So I'm going to go through the most basic concepts of .NET Core, understanding how it really works behind the scenes, which I think is pretty important when you start learning a new language. Just not to start coding from scratch, but also understand what you are doing. So we're going to go through that. And also then we're going to move to most advanced concepts. So I'm really excited to begin this new journey and I hope that you enjoyed it. These are going to be like the first two videos, a little bit more theoretical, but I think it's important to know the concepts. And please feel free to leave some feedback or comments about the videos or things that you want me to emphasize a little bit more. And let's get into it. So first, I want to give you a little glimpse of what .NET Core is, with three main concepts, which is cross-platform, open source, and web framework. So with the raw concept, we can say that it is a cross-platform, open source, and web application framework that you can use to build dynamic server-side render applications. You can also use it to create HTTP APIs that can be consumed by mobile applications or single-page applications built with Angular or React. I know that maybe this concept may sound a little bit harsh, and also if maybe you are a beginner or giving the first steps into web development and backend development, but don't worry, we're going to divide this huge monster into little chunks until you can feel confident about understanding what this definition really means. I'm a full stack developer which have worked mainly with .NET Core and also React. So I'm also planning into giving some lectures about React so we can cover the two worlds that you can see in here, which it says that we can use it as a server-side render framework or also as a HTTP API server. So these two are really different. If you don't know what they mean, then don't worry, we're going to go through them. But if you want to investigate by your own what these concepts mean, then it will be awesome. But don't worry that I'm going to go through them in this section and in the other ones, okay? As we saw before, one of the main characteristics about .NET Core is that it is a web framework, right? This framework word might be very common in the web development environment, so it's pretty important that you have or that you need to know what framework means. And for now, I want you to have a little glimpse of what it is and an idea, because it might seem fuzzy at the start, but then it is going to make more sense, all right? So basically, a framework lets us provide important functionality to our web application so that we don't have to deal with writing all this code from scratch, all right? So you can see maybe a framework as a friend for us developers, which gives us a lot of things out of the box that we just need to understand how to use them, but not how to code them from scratch. We don't have to create them as they have been created for us, but we have just to know how to take advantage of them, all right? So some of the things that might be very important to know that this framework provides to us is networking, as you can see here, because it handles requests from clients and generate appropriate responses, which basically is the communication that empowers the web, the basic client-server architecture that we're going to be seeing later. It also let us create dynamic web applications, which basically are all those web pages that the information is different for every kind of user, right? Maybe not like a landing page of some hotel or things like that, that it's basically the same website for everyone. So you have to keep in mind, when do you need to build something with a framework like this, or if you need a static web page, for example a landing page or something like that, you can just use the basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to accomplish your goal, and it is going to be a lot more easy to develop. So if you really need to make your page dynamic, then you probably will need a framework to give you things that you need in order to accomplish that. All right, we're going to see how that works soon. Also, some of the things that it gives to us is login capability. For example, giving us the opportunity to create a profile and log into our application, so the website knows who we are. And for example, an e-commerce site, when I log in, then I might have some items in our shopping cart, that those items are particularly for me, right? The ones that I chose. So it let us include this type of functionality in a more simple way, and also let us log in with some third party like Facebook or Google that you might have seen. It's pretty common nowadays. Also, it provides a common structure for ensuring maintainability in our projects. Basically, when you begin a project using .NET Core, it gives you a template that it's pretty organized. So if you're working in a project in company A, then if you go to company B to work in .NET Core, then you're going to see pretty much the same structure, which is really important, because this type of conventions can be really hard if you have to create them from scratch. All right. Also, login, which makes this behavior easier. And login is pretty important because it lets us debug our application. If, for example, something went wrong and our application is not functioning as expected, then we can review the logs and see what is going on. So this is pretty important to tackle this kind of behavior and fix them as soon as possible. And finally, less boilerplate, because as we don't have to code all these things from scratch, some of them are very repetitive among applications, then we just, with some simple line of codes, can configure and make use of these things that the framework provides to us. All right. Now I want to finish this first video with this slide, because I don't want the videos to be that long, and also these first theoretical ones might be more dense in concepts and information, and most likely if you're a beginner, then you might be confused about all these concepts, because I was at first, right? So I know how you might feel. So I just want you to have an overview of what we're going to be seeing, of what you're going to be studying also with this new framework. So I really want just to finish with these 4 characteristics, okay? And then I'm going to do a little recap on what we saw, okay? So basically, .NET Core was built to achieve 4 main goals. As .NET Core is the latest version, before it was just called .NET Framework, and it was lacking some functionality that the .NET Core version came to solve. All right, so basically it wanted to be run and developed cross-platform, because before it was a limitation in which .NET Core, well, .NET applications actually just could be developed and deployed in Windows architecture. So nowadays we can, for example, develop our code in a Windows machine and then, for example, deploy them in a very cheap Linux server, right? Or the so-called Dockers that are very popular nowadays. This is possible. So we can basically run and develop these applications in whichever environment that we would like. So it is not a constraint anymore. Also, it was built with having a modular architecture in mind, which enforces a easier maintenance, right? So as we're going to be seeing, basically every .NET Core begins as a console application that we can then incorporate more modules to enhance and enrich the functionality of the application. So for example, a base template of a .NET Core application is basically a simple console application, and if we configure a couple of things and a couple of modules, then we can convert that console application into a web server that is going to be accepting requests and so on and so forth. All right, so we basically choose what we want to include in our application with modules, and this is very powerful, as we're going to be seeing once we jump into the code. Now we have that it is developed completely as open source software, which means that basically anyone can see the code and also contribute, right? So this makes that the increase of the performance of the features is growing so rapidly because anyone basically can contribute to the framework, and that is you can imagine a really large ecosystem of .NET Core developers. So you are in good hands if you decide to study this framework, because there's a lot of feedback, there's a lot of things out there in the internet that you can use. So that has been a really important milestone. And finally, it is also applicable to current trends as client-side applications. There is something called Blazor, which enables .NET Core to, instead of using server-side rendering as its main type of rendering, then we can use also client-side rendering. But this is confusing by now, right? So I don't want you to confuse you anymore, and we're going to leave that for now in there. But I just wanted you to know why .NET Core was built and what the developers had in mind that they wanted to solve. So now you know, and these are very important characteristics that make this framework that popular. Okay, and now we're going to wrap up a little bit with a final slide. So I want to wrap up with a summary. First of all, I want to say that you are making a very good decision into studying .NET Core, because it's so well documented. There's a lot of people requesting developers that know .NET Core, and the ecosystem is growing more and more every day, so that's good news. And I really want to be a companion to you through this journey so that you can feel comfortable understanding this new framework. If you have any doubts, just leave them in the comments and I'm going to be responding as soon as possible. All right, so I really hope that you take advantage of this course or series. And also we studied what .NET Core is in its essence, and also we saw some important concepts like open source, HTTP, APIs, server-side rendering, web framework. And I know that all these concepts can be overwhelming, right? But don't worry, we're going to go through them. Just I wanted to give you a glimpse of what it is, and also having these concepts in mind, maybe you can investigate by your own a little bit, get more familiar to them, and please feel free to leave in the comments any question that might rise, right? And we also studied why .NET Core was created. why or the issues that it wanted to solve, right? And in the next section, we're going to be studying how .NET Core works, and maybe a little bit of code. And I created some diagrams to make this process simpler, and also so that you can understand better, because it might be confusing at start, right? So I really want to make this process as easy as possible, and I hope that you enjoyed this series and this video. If so, please leave a like and also a comment, and I see you in the next one. Thank you so much.